Hi. In reading over anti-vax sites lately, I've concluded that these people are suffering from a couple of misconceptions. One is you can't really spend only a couple of hours on a search engine and thoroughly understand a complicated subject. This is especially true if half the information returned is nonsense. The other thing is that search engines are not magic. They are computer programs and are subject to the garbage in and garbage out rules as any other program. And third, if you don't understand a subject, it's very difficult to tell if the people who are trying to explain it to you don't know what they are talking about. From reading the anti-vax sites, I would almost come to the conclusion that the anti-vaxxers think it is okay for things like this to happen to their children, or worse, your children. The anti-vaxxers are not stupid. They do care about their kids. Unfortunately, this is the type of thing they are choosing for their kids, whether they know it or not. Before the vaccines came out, measles killed roughly 100,000 people worldwide every year, and many more were blinded or deafened. Childhood diseases aren't always harmless. If they were, there wouldn't be any real reason to make a vaccine for them. By the way, that's my leg. I had polio in 1951. The vaccine was released in 1955. Becoming an expert on a subject takes time and effort. BS degrees typically take 4 years. Masters and PhDs and MDs take several more years beyond that. And no search engine can cut that down to a few days, especially if they can't differentiate between accurate and nonsense information. Search engines build their databases by scanning websites for keywords. They're sometimes called web crawlers or web spiders. They're also looking for things like the number of links that are found from one website to another. Unfortunately, search engines scanners generally can't differentiate between a link with a description that says this is a great site versus this is a terrible site, don't go there. The old Hollywood agents comment, there's no such thing as a good or bad publicity, there is only publicity appears to apply. All of which basically means if you find a site that is terrible, don't put a link to it anywhere that a search engine crawler can scan them. The exact factors search engines use is a rather closely guarded trade secret. This is to avoid people gaming the search engines to improve their rankings. This absolutely does not stop anyone from trying. If you have a website, you can expect to get emails offering to tune your website to improve your standing. I was the administrator for my former company's website for a couple of years, and I would, on average, get about one of those a month. The thing to note in this is there is nothing in the search engine algorithm that determines if what the website says is true. There have been efforts to have subject matter experts check sites for accuracy. These efforts have resulted in rather limited databases or have just totally foundered under the number of sites. The statement, it must be true, I found it on the internet, is rather scary if you happen to believe it. Some time ago I made a short video for my niece's earth science class about the Earth's magnetic field. I wanted to include websites for reference. About half the websites I found were total nonsense. The thing to remember is that anybody can put anything on the internet, be it true, opinion, delusional propaganda, or an outright lie. Now, opinions are, perfectly valid. Anybody can have your own opinion. You should be aware that everybody's opinion is not equally valid. I mean, some people do know what they are talking about, at least on certain subjects. The phenomenon of someone who doesn't actually understand a subject but has strong opinions on it has been noted for a long time. Charles Darwin wrote that many of his loudest critics had no idea what the theory of evolution actually said. From what I've seen lately, nothing has changed in that regard. You may have noticed I have been saying search engines rather than Google. While Google is good, it's not the only search engine. I suggest you try the same search in different search engines. You will get strikingly different results. I will put links to several search engines I have used in the notes on this. For a more in-depth discussion, find a copy of Untangling the Web from the NSA. The copy available on the internet is 11 years old at this point and getting extremely dated, in that many websites it mentions are now dead or have changed from things like a free service to a subscription basis and so forth. But the main recommendation it makes on search engines is use more than one, and that's still extremely valid. If you don't know much about a subject, how do you know if a site that a search engine gives you is any good? This is actually a rather difficult problem. I can give you a couple of rules of thumb to use. This is nowhere near an exhaustive list. One of the things that should be a screaming red flag is if a site has a comment like, "They don't want you to know this." If they are politicians, business, civic, religious leaders, and what they don't want you to know is illegal or embarrassing, it's at least possibly true. It's also possibly true that the site authors are loons, and I do realize the two are not mutually exclusive. If they are scientists or doctors and what they don't want you to know is some basic truth about the field, the statement is a lie. I have master's degrees in physics and geophysics, and I have talked to an awful lot of people in a lot of different fields over the last 40 years, and I have never had anybody say anything remotely close to the general public knows too much about my field. I've visited a number of websites for various professional organizations, and in at least the last 10 years, virtually everyone I have visited for any reason had a get to know more about how this field works section on the website. These may be simple videos, or they may be a list of where can you go study this, and what books to read, and various things like that. Another thing that is probably the reddest of red flags is if you find a site that is actively trying to suppress the mention of peer-reviewed journal articles. If you find yourself in one of these, leave immediately. The peer review process is not foolproof. It is, however, somewhat self-correcting over time. Having several subject matter experts review a paper before its publication generally catches a lot of nonsense that would otherwise make it into print. And sometimes even improves the resulting paper. It has been argued that truly innovative papers have a hard time getting published. To a small degree, this is true. But an extraordinary claim requires the evidence to back it up. And if the paper doesn't have it, it's probably isn't ready to be published anyway. Something else that should make you a bit cautious is clickbait type headings. while panic-inducing headlines may get viewers, that doesn't say an awful lot for the content of the site. If you're visiting because of that, bear that in mind. Things like the education background of the authors of the site are important, but not necessarily definitive. What degree does the author have? Where is it from? What publications has he made? Are all valid questions. Some sites don't provide that information. It's usually possible to find something about it, though. Searching the author's name on Google Scholar or LinkedIn are usually good places to start. Something that comes up every now and again is that someone will be found to have a degree from a diploma mill. This makes the news much more often with government jobs, since private organizations tend to simply fire the guy and go on about their business. Diploma mills exist to provide a transcript for someone, for an employer. A degree from a diploma mill is a reason for leaving a site and never returning. Visit thunderwoodcollege.com for a discussion on diploma mills and accreditation organizations. And while you're there, you can get your own fake degree, but you cannot get a transcript from them. It's also free. As with colleges and diploma mills, there are good journals and bad journals. Good journals normally are affiliated with one or more professional societies and have mostly been around for a while, in some cases hundreds of years. With a bad journal, the peer review process tends to be determined by whether the check cleared. And some of them are so bad they will write the paper for you for a fee. Something to remember is a degree in one field does not automatically give expertise in another. In the case of an author with a PhD in English literature and a site discussing quantum string theory, I would expect the site to be well written, but considerably less certain about the physics and math discussed. Be cautious if the site has testimonials. Consider it a pinkish rather than a red flag. I took your product and got better. Well, good for you. The placebo effect is real. Some conditions get better on their own. What other treatments have you had? Basically, how do you know the product worked? People who don't get better generally don't leave testimonials saying this stuff is terrible. And if they do put them up there, the site owners are perfectly within their rights to delete them. Testimonials may sound good, but they're not really proof. This brings us to studies cited by a site. If the site doesn't give the study title, author, and journal reference, consider it at least a dark pink flag. If it does give these references, look them up. Google Scholar will at least let you find the abstract, and you can read through that. If you don't understand the science behind the paper, there are some things you can do. And college libraries have the textbooks and many journals. You may not be able to check them out, but you should at least be able to read them. If the study has a statistical analysis, ask how random is the sample and how large is the sample size. Be very cautious with studies with a small number of participants, and small is like less than 100. If you haven't made headway understanding the study, you can email the author and ask. They may not have time to spend explaining a lot to you, but they may very well be flattered enough that you care to at least point you in the right direction. Another thing, websites do cost money to run. It is something of a pinkish flag if the site seems to be pushing you to buy things from it. Like, click here to buy my book, and click over here to get, supplements, and click down here to learn how to use industrial bleach to treat autism. Oh, by the way, if you see buttons like that on this video, please do not click them. I didn't put them there. I haven't written a book. Some supplements are good if you've got a blood test that says you need them. Others are frequently harmless or a waste of money, and some of them can actually be hazardous to your health. And I wish that thing about the industrial bleach was a joke, but it's not. If a site claims doctors only recommend vaccinations to get money, consider it an extremely questionable site for a couple of reasons. One is they're basically accusing doctors of medical malpractice and putting their own financial interest ahead of the patient's health. The real economic incentive, of course, is to treat the diseases. Think of how many office and hospital visits are required for any given disease versus how much a doctor's office would potentially be clearing for a given vaccination. There are a couple of browser extensions you can get that may help things out a bit. Probably the best one is the Google Scholar button. If you're reading something and you see some term, you highlight it, click the button, and Google Scholar will bring up a page of papers that are mentioning that fact. Another one that's available on Chrome and Firefox is called Rebutter. That's R-B-U-T-R. The way this one works is that someone has to have visited the site and concluded that the site is full of baloney and cares enough about the subject to write another web page to explain why this is nonsense. This works both ways, of course. The people writing the nonsense websites can make their own rebuttal to the rebuttal. If you have Rebutter installed and you find there are a lot of effectively complaints about this website, it's worth thinking about.